As we approach all these challenges that we're facing, too many of us, and this happens in rehabilitation, this happens from starting over, this really happens in every aspect of our lives. You can't finish something until you start. Too many of us, we wait thinking, okay, well, the circumstances will be better in a little bit of time. Nonsense. You see that opportunity, you put your foot across that line and you get in the game and you start competing.
Put that coffee down.
Creators are leaders. Be careful what kind of leaders you're producing here.
Helen, we're both in sales. Let me tell you why I sucked as a salesman.
They realized that to be in power, you didn't need guns or money or even numbers. You just needed the will to do what the other guy wouldn't.
I'm not leaving. The show goes on.
Well, hello there, friend. Welcome to the Construction Leadership Podcast, where we deliver ideas and insights from leaders across the construction industry every single week to help you lead more effectively. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Capital One Trade Credits. If you, my friend, are interested in growing your top line revenue while decreasing risk, while leveraging a state-of-the-art digital platform to make it easier for your customers to buy from you, who doesn't want that? Who doesn't? Well, you're going to want to check out Capital One Trade Credit. So if you have not listened to the last couple episodes, you are missing out on some very good content. One on recruiting, starring Miss Ricka Brandon, and recruiting talent, building stronger teams is something we always have to do in good times and bad. And the one before that was a panel discussion with a whole series of leaders that got together to share their insights on the state of the industry on a whole host of things. And that was led by moderator Matt Saunders, who is an economist at John Burns Real Estate Consulting. And on the panel was George Emerson, the board chair of Sierra Pacific Industries and the largest landowner in the United States, Steve Patterson, president and CEO of Central Valley, Mr. Steve Swanson, president and CEO of the Swanson Group in the Pacific Northwest, and Mr. Victor Fresca, the VP of Sales and Marketing at Dixieline. So if you have not listened to those, go back. Those, I think, share a lot of insights, a lot of bang for the buck in relatively short episodes. Now, all of this talent was brought together at the WCLBMA annual convention at the end of October, and I was thrilled to be part of it. Big acronym there, WCLBMA. Well, let's break it down. WC stands for West Coast. LBM is, well, lumber building materials, you know that. And it's an association. So they brought everyone together. They had a fantastic event. And I will tell you this, whether this is for an association that you belong to, or maybe you're on the board, or you contribute to, or how to host a great event for your own company, there is a playbook for this. And it's how you will be able to make sure that your event licks the competition. That's right. I'm making up an acronym of my own for the 5 steps that you can take to have a great event. And this is what the WCLBMA did. So LICKS, L-I-C-K-S, the L stands for have a great location. They did at the Hilton in the Gas Lamp District in San Diego. It was fantastic. The I stand for industry leaders. I just rattled off a few. George Emerson, Steve Patterson, Steve Swanson, Victor Fresca, Matt Saunders of John Burns Real Estate Consulting. The C stands for some light-hearted competition. They had 2 Papa Shots there. Everybody was getting involved. It was sponsored by our friends at Boise Cascade, and we kept score. We had a mixed team bracket for a man and a woman together, and then we also had a singles, and it was a ton of fun. So that's the C. The K is have a phenomenal keynote, and that's what we're talking about here. This is an edited version of the keynote by Mr. Bill Walton. I'm going to come back to him in a second. And the last one is we leverage social media for the S. So good location, industry leaders, some lighthearted competition, great keynote, and leverage social media. So that is what the WCLBMA did, and you can do the same. So let's talk about this here now. Let's talk about Mr. Bill Walton. If you know of him, if you know of his career, or you've heard him as a broadcaster covering NBA games or the Pac-12 out west, he is a character. He's a one of a kind. He's one of one. And I've been a big fan for a long time, mainly because when you grow up and you're a tall, skinny ginger, many adults around you will try to give you some hope. There's some reference for maybe what you might become one day because there's not many gingers around anymore. Mathematically speaking, I think we're supposed to be off the face of the earth by 2024. Don't quote me on that. And that's how I got introduced to Mr. Bill Walton. He played at UCLA. He followed the great Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. At that point, it was called Lou Alcindor. Walton was part of an 88-game winning streak at UCLA and won a pair of championships and I believe 3 Player of the Year awards. After graduating from UCLA, he maintained a strong relationship with John Wooden, and they communicated and toured, speaking and collaborating for the rest of his life. So he has a ton of great insight into the legendary John Wooden. In the NBA, Bill Walton had a Hall of Fame career, and then he was a speaker. And if we stopped right there, it sounds like the greatest story ever. But the reality is he had a stuttering affliction till his early 20s. And throughout his 14 years in the NBA, over 9.5 of them, he was not able to play because of a degenerative ailment that started in his feet, went to his knees, and ended up impacting his back. So he went through so many trials and tribulations. He was smart. He was funny. He was extremely generous with his time. He came the night before just to meet us and hang out, and that wasn't in the contract at all. He was a joy to be with. So these next 2 episodes here, this is the keynote he gave, an edited version of that, and want to thank him for allowing us to do that, to share it with you, the leadership and management lessons from that. And then the next episode that you will absolutely have to listen to is my brief one-on-one conversation with him, and we cover some new territory, and it was a blast. So without further ado, please enjoy this keynote given by the legendary Hall of Fame basketball player Bill Walton at the San Diego Annual Convention for the WCLBMA, the end of October. As always, thank you for listening.
West Coast, lumber, building materials, association, here we go. Yeah. Where dreams become reality, where we come to grow, and where the deal goes down. Okay, I know this is riding the waves of uncertainty, which is really the story of my life. So I'm going to add just 2 subtitles to it, because all I ever wanted in life was more. First subtitle is, I'll take care of this. The second one is, flexibility is the key to stability. Now, this conference is about uncertainty, volatility, risk, doubt, hesitation, absolute failure possibility in every single moment. But it's also about adversity, overcoming the challenges. It's about building. It's about foundations. But it's also about motivation. It's about the skills you need to overcome all these challenges. And then it's about the persistence, the perseverance, the discipline to get what it is that you want. Now, all of this stuff leads into leadership, the building of teams, and then the development of champions. That ultimately comes down to choices and decisions and the ever-present need for sacrifice, discipline, and honor. With all that being said, this is really the story of my life, because my life can be compared to one of your saw blades with really big teeth, up and down, up and down. Spectacular rises all the way to the top, followed almost immediately by catastrophic collapse and failure and being at the bottom again. Now, I'm the luckiest dude in the world, having grown up here in San Diego. I was born less than a mile from here. I live just a couple of miles from here. And this has been my dream. And so I was so fortunate to have the greatest parents ever. Now, they had zero interest in sports. None. I never shot a basket with my dad. I saw him run one time at the church picnic and fell over laughing. My mom was our town's librarian. But I was super lucky in that I found my first coach when I was 8 years old. He was a San Diego native who, after high school, became a fireman. And what do firemen do? They do just what you do. They see trouble and they head right for it. They do. Where's Tim? Tim, where's our insurance man, Tim? What does Tim do? When there's trouble there, he is right into the mix. I'll take care of this. And that's what my first coach did, Rocky. He was the volunteer coach at our elementary school for 59 years of his life. Never took a penny. Coached every student, every day, every sport, every level. When he died just a few years ago after volunteering for 59 years, he was the richest guy I've ever known. I can't tell you if he knew anything about sports, but he knew life, and he knew team, he knew community, he knew building, and he knew foundations. Then I had the privilege of finding basketball very early, which gave me a world that you create for everyone in your community: hope, opportunity, and purpose. And the voices in my ear growing up as a child here in Southern California, Chick Hearn, the Laker broadcaster, the greatest broadcaster ever, and then whose brain and mouth were just in perfect sync and harmony at all times. And then John Wooden. Every coach, every teacher, every mentor, every leader I had as a child was a disciple of John Wooden and Chick Hearn. That was the culture that I grew up in. Sports ultimately became the easiest thing in my life. Academics were second. Straight A student. My challenges have been orthopedic health. I was born with birth defects in both feet that they never found until it was way too late. But nothing was going to stop me. I grew up, like most of you, in an era when you never went to the doctor and you'd have a bone sticking out, right? And rub some dirt on it, let's go, it'll be better by tomorrow. Put some ice on it. I don't even think we used ice in those days. And just go outside and sit underneath the tree for a little while. And so here I was. It was a fantastic world of sports and academics, but the challenges that I had. I've had 39 orthopedic operations. I ground both of my feet into dust. They're now both fused, and it was a very touch and go situation all the time. When I was 28 years old, they told me they were going to have to cut my foot off if things didn't turn around very quickly. And then there was all these different moments. I had my first surgery when I was 14 years old. I was playing basketball at Helix in the summertime, August 1967, playing against some really old guys. They were in their 30s. I think Bradley might have been in that game. And anyway, I was torching these really old guys as a 14-year-old. They didn't like it, so they took me down with a high-low, and I had to have my first operation. And lying in that hospital bed, the uncertainty that we all face every single moment. And so there it was, and then grinding through the foot troubles and everything. I broke my spine January 7th, 1974, playing for UCLA up in the Palouse at Pullman, Washington State. Not that I remember the date, but hadn't lost a game in 5 years. After 11 days in the UCLA hospital, I got up, put a corset on with steel rods in this corset, flew across this great country of ours to Notre Dame, and we lost the 88-game winning streak. And my winning streak as a member of my teams goes back to my junior year of high school. So it was way up there, but he hadn't lost a game. But we broke Coach Wooden's ultimate mantra, which was, all I ask is that you do your best. Your best will be good enough. But whatever it is you do, don't beat yourself, don't cheat yourself, don't shortchange yourself. That will be the worst kind of defeat you'll ever suffer. When I got to the NBA, realized that little Billy growing up with his red hair and his freckles and his big nose and his goofy nerdy looking face and his horrendous speech impediment, when I joined the NBA, I was 21 years old. It was the first time in my life that I'd ever encountered anybody that didn't have my best interest at heart. When I look around this room and see all the friends that I made last night, I see Joe and I see Matt and I see Tom and Rob and Charlie, and I don't see Natalie and I don't see Lori in here. Maybe they had something else to do, but all these people whose stories resonated with me because these were the folks who I encountered as a young child. But when I was 21 and joined the NBA, I finally encountered somebody who did not have my best interests at heart. And that's when the endless string of stress fractures came into my life on my feet, and then the endless string of uncertainty and all the different aspects that went into that. But the injuries, which kept piling up, ultimately both my knees have been replaced, my spine has been reconstructed, replaced, rebuilt. My hands and wrists don't work at all. And look at my face. I mean, for those of you who are still lucky enough to play basketball, don't play defense with your face, because this is what happens to you. I broke my nose 14 times. If I could still play, I need one more just to straighten it out just a little bit. I had my front teeth knocked out 10 different times. And so, but with all the physical challenges, I mean, I spent half my adult life in the hospital. And that level of uncertainty, which you folks think you're facing right now. Look, risk, doubt, hesitation, failure, that is part of our lives. This is the life that we choose. And we have to address all of these issues every single day. To hear the panel before me and all the different guys and just fantastic leaders and community pillars and the foundations, the sense of being able to take risk and uncertainty, riding those waves, and turn that into an opportunity. That's our ultimate challenge. But with all my challenges, my greatest challenge has been the fact that I'm a lifelong stutterer and that I couldn't say a word. I couldn't say hello. I couldn't say thank you until I was 28 years old. Learning how to speak is my greatest accomplishment and your worst nightmare. And when I made this deal, with John to come on down here and Bradley, you know, they said, Bill, we got to keep to the schedule. I said, okay, I got it. How much time did I get? They told me how much time I had. And so I told them that I would look at the clock. And I did at the beginning. But this is like life. This is like a basketball game. This is like a Grateful Dead concert. We know when it's going to start, but we have no idea where we'll be when we do finally come to an end. But I will be here throughout the day. And afterwards, luncheon, I'm going to take questions later, and I'll sign autographs and take pictures later. I'll make all your bar mitzvah videos for you. I'll be here through lunch and even into the early afternoon. So as we think about how this all plays out, and I know that we are now currently at the halfway mark of this remarkable convention for WCLBMA. Rolls right off my tongue. And so, as great a halftime as I've ever had took place with the 1986 Boston Celtics team. And this is how long ago that was. I know that you guys are all business guys with the math degrees and everything, but this was so long ago that Atlanta, who was the opponent that night, they were a good team at that point. And so we were down in Atlanta on a Friday night at the old Omni, second biggest crowd in the history of the Omni. The only crowd that was ever bigger or when the world champion Portland Trailblazers went in there in 1977. And so here we are. We got this great team, classic team for the ages. They had a good team. They had Dominique Wilkins and Doc Rivers and Reggie Theus and a lot of good players, right? But we had Larry Bird, we had Kevin McHale, and nobody else did. We also had Red Auerbach as our top guy. So it was fantastic. We go in there and the place is just electric as can be, and we're getting killed, right? Pretty much like the Padres did in game 1. And here it was, we had no chance. We're down 25 at the half, right? And the fans are going crazy in Atlanta. They're taunting everybody. And the other players, with the exception of Dominique Wilkins, he had too much class. He never said a word. We go into the locker room with our tails between our legs. We sit down in our chairs, and our great coach, K.C. Jones, one of the 6 Hall of Fame coaches that I played for, and the most like John Wooden of any coach I ever played for on and off the court. Please bear in mind that this year, when I was named one of the top 75 players in the history of the NBA, they also named the top 15 coaches in the history of the NBA. Of those 15, I played for 4 of them. In chronological order: Lenny Wilkins, Jack Ramsey, K.C. Jones, and Red Auerbach. So K.C. walks into the locker room. We're down 25. He looks at us, and he looks at his watch, and he finds the cooler over in the corner. He goes over there, pulls a beer out of the cooler, right? Pops it, sits in his chair, pounds it down, gets up, looks at his watch, looks at us, goes back to the cooler for a second beer, pounds that down, gets up, looks at his watch, looks at us, goes back and gets a third beer, pounds that down, right? Then he looks at his clock one last time, stands up and says, "Let's go." And that's all he said. And we go out on the court, and we're so fired up and so ready to go, just witnessing and being inspired by K.C. pounding down 3 beers in 15 minutes, that as we're getting ready to start, it's right in front of our bench. Larry always took the ball out of bounds, right? So Larry, and you watch the games today, the top players never take the ball out of bounds because they're worried they're never going to get it back. But when you have a real team, which is defined by these characteristics, the greatness of the teams. I heard all these leaders up here today, and the businesses that you guys run as the serial entrepreneurs and the foundational pillars of your community. What makes the teams work? Leadership, teamwork, communication, focus, execution, hope, opportunity, and purpose, friendship, loyalty, cooperation, and then sacrifice, discipline, and honor. And that was Larry Bird, and that was our Boston Celtic team in '86. And so, Larry, the referee hands him the ball right in front of our bench to start the second half. Larry, we're down 25. He takes the ball and he pushes it right back into the midsection of the referee, who's standing there shocked and stunned. But Larry won't let the referee go. And he looks right into his eyes, deep into his soul. And he says to that referee, as serious as he could be, "We're down 25. We're not going to quit. You make sure you don't quit either." Larry started the third quarter by making his first 11 shots. 7 of them were threes. At the end of the third, after being down 25, we're tied. We won the game in overtime. We did not need a plane to get home that night. Know how to use your halftime effectively. So, as we move forward in life and facing the volatility, I'm a stutterer, and the risk, the adversity, and the uncertainty that's always there, when we're down, we have to have a path forward. I've been down so many times that I know how to get started again. When we got to COVID, I had to start over 21 times. The 21st time, which was COVID, was the first time I was ever healthy. And it was all the external factors that were forcing me to start over again. And at 21, I just stopped counting because we had to start over so many different times in COVID. And so the path forward that I use all the time is have a dream, have a goal, have a vision. What is it that you want? Find a coach. There's never been greatness without leadership, without a coach. And the best coach to have is someone who's on their way back from where you want to go. And I heard all the guys talking about building and developing those champions, but obviously you certainly have to have a team. I wanted to be great from the very beginning. I learned and realized immediately that I couldn't do it by myself. I needed a coach, I needed a team, I needed a platform, and I needed the fans, I needed the customers. And so nobody makes it to the top alone. You have to immerse yourself in the culture that's been established, created, nurtured, and fed by the guy at the top, and that's you guys. Then you have to build your foundation. And in this industry, it's all about the foundation. In everything in life, it's all about the foundation. That's why I failed to ever do what I wanted to do, which was to be the best for all time. But my feet, my foundation would not allow me to do that. And so understand that the strength of the team is the strength of the individual. And then in a group dynamic, the ever-present elements of sacrifice, discipline, and honor. Now, I had the great privilege of being the broadcaster during Michael Jordan's career. And Michael was just absolutely perfect in everything he's done, on and off the court, with the exception maybe of the Hornets down in Charlotte, but I think that's their name. I really can't keep track. And so, but when I was broadcasting Michael's career, it was my turn to ask the questions. And so he comes in impeccably dressed, very much like Brad. Whatever happened to Bradley? Here's Bradley right here. Okay, Bradley's writing a love letter to his girl there. So Michael was always impeccably dressed like Bradley, right? Just sharp as can be, clean cut. I mean, the antithesis of me. And so I sit down and I'm ready to ask the questions. And my first question to Michael was, hey, how much time, Michael, do you spend on those spectacular plays that we've never seen before that you make seem familiar? Michael, how does it feel to you to have proven that Copernicus, Galileo, Isaac Newton, Albert Einstein, and Stephen Hawking have no idea what they're talking about? Because when we watch you play, Michael, we come to believe that gravity and physics do not exist. And Michael looked at me with a uncertain look to his face as to how to answer that question. I wasn't waiting around. So as soon as he looked like he was formulating his answer, I said, Michael, how much time do you spend on all that stuff? The stuff that we loop endlessly. Every television network has a Michael Jordan button. Whenever there's dead air, they just push that button and they start looping Michael's career, right? He looked at me and he answered firmly, succinctly. He said, Bill, I don't spend a second on any of those plays. I spend all my time on my foundation, on my fundamentals, on my footwork, on my physical fitness. And what I really spend my time on, Bill, I spend my time on the dream of how I'm going to get this done with who I have as teammates and who they have on their team and how that's all going to play out. I also learned in my own personal experience that as you're going through your life, and this is a mature audience, at least visually. And so here, I have changed so much over the course of my life that I have come to the realization, and this came to me in the 4.5 years that I spent on the ground, starting February 24th, 2008, all the way to 2012 and a half, when my spine failed. And that's when I learned, because I thought I knew what it took to be the champion and all the different elements. I thought I knew everything that it took to be the champion. You know, success in sports had come very, very easy and early to me. But now I'm on that ground with that uncertainty, riding that wave. And that's when I learned how that concept of everything that it takes is just exponentially bigger than anything that I ever thought. So I have grown in that capacity. Hopefully I've grown in a lot of ways. I know I'm growing physically in terms of adding weight all the time here, but I just love food, man, and I love dessert, and particularly with wooden utensils. And so here it was that as we approach all these challenges that we're facing, too many of us, and this happens in rehabilitation, this happens from starting over, this really happens in every aspect of our lives. You can't finish something until you start. Too many of us, we wait thinking, okay, well, the circumstances will be better in a little bit of time. Nonsense. You see that opportunity, you put your foot across that line and you get in the game and you start competing. And so here it was with me growing up and the concept of you guys building your own teams. And I heard about all the labor issues and guys not wanting to work and not finding the right talent pool and not getting paid enough. So I was super lucky to have played for these remarkable coaches who were masters at team building. And that started for me with John Wooden. Now, look, my first coach, Rocky, in San Diego, my high school coach was the biology teachers, fantastic coaches and everything. Now, John Wooden, he gets a lot of credit because he wrote everything down and he was more on the national stage, right? So, Coach Wooden, when I was 15 years old, already a good basketball player, and I see all the pressures that you guys are under with everybody coming to you, trying to make deals with you, right? Well, that was my life when I was 15. And it's the summer of love here in California. I'd already been to my first Grateful Dead concert, man, and I was just on my way. It was fantastic, right? I'm a young guy here like Brandon with the Instagram promotion last night. Good luck with that, Brandon. Let me know. Just tell my wife, Lori, the greatest everything ever in my life. She's also our CEO, Chief Everything Officer. Without her, I'm not alive. Without her, I have nothing. And so here was all these coaches coming to me. Bill, come on, man, come to our school. The recruiting pitch, right? We'll make you the most famous player ever in our program, Bill. You'll set all the records. Mr. Walton, my dad, we know you're a working man. How about a new job? My dad was a social worker by day, an adult educator by night, and a music teacher on the weekends. He turned to my dad, how about a new job, Mr. Walton? Then they turned to my mom, the librarian. Mrs. Walton, how about a shopping spree? How about some new jewelry? And then they came back to me, and then they said, Billy, here's the cheerleader's phone number. She's our closer out there. Now, I'm 15, right? Let your imagination run wild. I used to think I had a vivid imagination, but that was before I met Dennis Rodman and Marv Albert. And they changed the entire spectrum of what was going on out there. And then John Wooden came into our lives, and he walked in the same house that I grew up in. My mom lived there for 69 years. My dad died 18 years ago. My mom just died this year, January 8th, 2022. And she was 23 days shy of her 95th birthday. And I was the last person to see her. We just lived 10 minutes apart, and I would go there every day that I was in town. And this final day, I say goodnight to her, put the blankets up, and I kissed her, and I said, good night, Mom. I love you so much. Thanks for the greatest life ever. I'll see you tomorrow. And my mom said, oh, Billy, I'm so excited. Thanks for coming over and just sharing all the great stuff with me. And by the way, Billy, did you ever get a job? And so I said, Mom, I'm really close, Mom. I got this deal here with the West Coast Lumber and Building Manufacturers Materials Association. You know, I got a chance, Mom. She didn't make it to October 20th, 2022. But anyway, that house, John Wooden walked in that night in 1967, 15 years old, high school sophomore. And he looked at me, looked at my parents, and said, Bill, Mr. and Mrs. Walton, I know what all the other schools are promising you. But that's not the way life works. There's no guarantees, except if you're doing business with Tim, who's going to take care of you when times get tough, right? And so here it was. She said, no guarantees. Only thing I can promise you, Bill, I'll give you a chance. I'll give you a chance to be a part of something special. When you're part of something special, you're going to spend the rest of your life trying to recreate that, trying to duplicate that. But it's a privilege to be a part of something special, and privilege carries with it duty, obligation, and responsibility. And then he turned it, and he said, Bill, you're facing this huge choice in your life, right? This biggest choice you faced to this point. And you have to understand what it is you want. You want to be the champion, which I think you do because I've seen you play. You're going to be fine. But if you want to be the champion in everything you do, that's going to require you choosing who your teammates are going to be, who your coach is going to be, what the platform is going to be. And that's why you come to UCLA, because your ultimate level of success, accomplishment, achievement, and happiness in life is not based on you. It's how good those guys are next to you. I heard all these panelists up here talking about how hard it is to build the team there. And that's where Wooden was at his best. And so here it was. I made that decision. And it was, I never even looked back. It was the only decision that I really wanted. I wanted to go to UCLA, and I wanted to play for John Wooden, and I wanted to play in that tradition, and I wanted to play in that legacy. And, you know, one thing you learn as trying to be the champion is you learn to love pressure. And you think it's tough being up here as a stutterer with no notes or anything? You try following Kareem Abdul-Jabbar at UCLA. But I loved that. That's what I wanted, right? I also had the privilege of playing for Red Auerbach. Now, I was part of some of the greatest teams ever. This doesn't count the early days, the Helix and the elementary school and all the other stuff we did. But the Portland Trailblazers started there 48 years ago. And we, to this day, are the youngest team to have ever won the championship in the NBA. The oldest guy on the team was 24. The Clippers, yeah, Donald Sterling Clippers. If you ever doubt the value of leadership, look at the difference between the Donald Sterling Clippers and the Steve Ballmer Clippers. From the farce that was Donald Sterling to the criminality of the business practices. I mean, the checks bounced higher than the balls did with Donald Sterling. And then the Boston Celtics, my boyhood dream team, Bill Russell, my favorite player ever on and off the court. And I know I was talking to you about Steve Nash. I love Steve Nash, but he's just a fraction below Bill Russell there. And so here I was. I begged and I pleaded and I bought my way onto the Boston Celtics. Left everything I had here in California in Donald Sterling's office. And I get to Boston and I was excited as can be, but I still had to pass a physical. Now, I have never been able to pass a physical. And so here I am lying there in the hospital bed, the Mass General Hospital, East End Astoria Drive, and I'm surrounded in this room, medical examining room, right? Doctors everywhere, stethoscopes, white coats, tongue depressors, whatever, protractors, a lot of rubber gloves. And here it was. My x-rays are all over the walls. And I can hear the doctors talking. What are we going to tell Red Auerbach? Look at his feet. Look at his knees. Look at his spine. Look at his hands. Look at his wrist. Look at his face. We can't pass this guy. And then Red comes walking in the door, just burst through the double doors, smoking his cigar in the hospital, right? Said, who are you guys and what are you doing with my player? Said, Red, come here, man. Look at his feet. Look at his spine. Look at his face. Red, we can't pass him. Red says, shut up. I'm in charge here. He pushes him out of the way, and I'm lying on the gurney over there. He walks over to me smoking his cigar, looks down at me and says, Walton, can you play? And I looked up at him with the sad, soft eyes of a young man who just wanted one more chance to be a part of something special. So I looked up at Red, and I said, Red, I think I can, Red. I think I can. I'll give you everything I got. Red steps back, takes a drag on that cigar. Would have made Jerry Garcia proud as can be, man. Would have made Bill Clinton even prouder. And he holds it in, right? And he's just sitting there and he's thinking, he's making all the decisions and the calculations. Fortunately, there was a ton of doctors there because Red is now sweating. His eyes are bulging out. He's still holding this in. And finally, you can see that he gets it. And he exhales. And I swear that smoke came out green. And there was shamrocks and leprechauns all up against the neon lights. And Red looks around with a big smile on his face and he goes, he's fine. He passes. Let's go. We got a game. We won the championship that year. Now, to win the championship, and for you guys to be successful as leaders and team builders, you have to be able to develop the champion players. And that's what great coaches do. Now, we'll talk about the mindset of the champion right here. Now, it takes talent to get to the top. It takes character to stay there. Never measure yourself by what you have done, but rather by what you could have or should have been able to do. Those who are not willing to risk going too far will never know how far they can go. You'll never learn what you don't want to know. Talk is cheap, but vision true. Settling for something you don't want brings no rewards. Believe in yourself, because if you don't, who will? And then, when life looks like Easy Street, there's danger at your door. And so here was Larry Bird, who was the greatest player I ever played with by far. There were other good ones. Kevin McHale was very good. The Blazer guys were great. The UCLA guys, Greg and Jamal and everything. But this guy, Larry Bird. Kevin, we called him Frankenstein because Kevin could stand there at a full 6'10" and stand up straight as can be, dangle his arms and scratch his shins without bending over. And then Kevin, when he needed his foot operated on, he needed the screw put into his foot, they just took the screw out of his neck and put it right into his foot. Now, but Larry was so incredible in so many different ways. Because, you know, what really defines the champions is their mental acuity, their decision-making processes, and their emotional commitment. And Larry, Kareem, Wilt, Russell, Oscar, Magic, Jordan, and I don't talk really much about the players who are still playing today because they have such the advantage because they're so fresh of mind. But you look back at what those guys, those 7 guys did, and I was playing with one of them, Larry. Now, you win one of 2 ways in life. You're just overwhelmingly better, and the other team just becomes irrelevant cannon fodder. You don't even really care about them. Or sometimes the other team is good, and that's when you got to have somebody who's better than anybody they have. Because when your best player outplays their best player, you're going to win. And we had Larry Bird. Nobody else did. We had Kevin McHale. Nobody else did. We had Red Auerbach. Nobody else did, right? And so K.C. Jones, we're there at the moment of truth, right there in the huddle for the final play of the game. And he's stroking his chin, looking at that clipboard, trying to figure out where we're going to go, right? And Larry, who has even less patience than me, Larry leans in. Now, you have to realize that when Larry was playing college basketball at Indiana State, Teachers College, where John Wooden got his coaching start at the collegiate level, Larry, when he was there during this NCAA tournament one spring day, in between games, he was out playing softball with the girls. And he took a big softball right on the end of the index finger of his shooting hand. And like all of us in those days, never went to the doctor. So his finger ends up shaped graciously, generously, kindly being described in the shape of a Z, like Zorro, right? And we could never figure out where Larry was pointing because that finger was so crooked. And so while K.C. is looking at the clipboard, what are we going to do? Larry leans right in and says, K.C., just give me the ball right there. I'll make the jumper. We're out of here with the victory. K.C. immediately regroups, looks up at us. We're all standing there, Kevin, Chief, me, Scotty Wedman, DJ, Danny, Jerry Seasting, Rick Carlisle. And K.C. goes, shut up, Bird. I'm the coach here. We're like, it's okay, K.C. Larry's already got 43 points. He's got 25 rebounds, 13 assists. We just need one more play. Come on. K.C. goes, I got it, guys. Come on, we're going to give the ball to Larry Bird right there. Larry was so good, he would walk out on the court, go to the other team and tell them what the play was, and they still couldn't stop him. Now, here it was with John Wooden, because I made that decision, never looked back. I was his easiest recruit. I became his worst nightmare, and I drove the poor guy to an early grave at 99. Because I always wanted to know why. Why I had to cut my hair, why I had to shave, why I had to wear the clothes he wanted me to wear, why Nixon was president, why we were in Vietnam, and why the cheerleaders couldn't be in my hotel room on the road trips. I mean, what's up with that? And so Coach Wooden, who had the patience of a saint, he would stand there, rest his chin on his thumb, put his finger over his parched lips, and he would listen, and he would listen. And he would finally just roll his eyes, wave his hands, and lean in and say, you know, Bill, it's all fine and good that you think that way, but I'm the coach here. And while we've enjoyed having you, we're going to miss you. Now, in 43 years with the guy, I never changed his mind. Not one time on anything. And as soon as he said, we've enjoyed having you, but we're going to miss you, I knew I had lost. So it wasn't until I joined the NBA that I realized what a tragic mistake, because I thought everybody had the same life that I had, the same opportunities, the same privilege. We had nothing, but we had everything. We had La Mesa Lumber as our Little League sponsor, as our youth basketball league sponsors. I got to work at Dixie-Line. Yeah, and here it was. I got to dream about being part of the NBA. And you know, in the remarkable sense of, wow, in 75 years of the NBA, with 4,700 players, approximately, there's only 12 of them who were named Wood. And I just can't, I cannot fathom how that is possible, with wood being the most important. I mean, this is lumber, this is building materials, please. And so here it was that when I joined the NBA, and I first went to Portland and had a job for a day and a half as a lumberjack, and then I realized that this probably was not the best choice and decision in my life. But it sure sounded good before I got there. And all these gigantic chainsaws and cables flying everywhere, oh my God. And so as soon as I got to the NBA, I realized what a tragic mistake and waste of my life I had gone through with John Wooden. So I immediately went back and I apologized to him and I pledged to him that I was going to quit causing the poor guy grief and consternation. So now we started doing things together. other than just coach and player. We started doing shows like this. We did everything: bar mitzvahs, fire station car washes, massive television shows, arena shows. And one day, late in his life, he's in his late 90s by this point, but still sharp as can be, we're doing a big show, 20,000 people, right? The first 10 rows were just all media guys like Bradley in here. And the guy was just taking notes just feverishly the whole time. And it gets to the Q&A, which we'll eventually get to. I did take a look at the clock at the beginning. And so here it was that when it gets to the Q&A, Coach Wooden, he picked who was going to ask the questions. And he only picked on the pretty ladies. Let them ask all the questions, right? And so finally, gets to the end of the Q&A, and John, the John of the day, comes up and whispers in Coach Wooden's ear, "One more question." And this guy, who looked a lot like Bradley, he's been dying to get in. He has a big press badge on, right? He's writing everything down. And Coach Wooden, as he's looking around, announcing one last question, "Come on, Coach, let me ask the question." Coach Wooden had fantastic peripheral vision, right? Never even looked at him. Finally, he comes back and says, "Young man, what's your question?" Now, just by looking at him, you could tell there was no way he could have been around during all these days when all this stuff went down, right? He's just too young, have no idea, the risk, the uncertainty, riding the waves, and adversity, challenges, doubt, hesitation, all the stuff that went on for all of us. And so the guy stands up and asks his question. And he says, "Coach Wooden, were you really going to kick Bill Walton off the team because he wasn't going to shave, he wasn't going to cut his hair, he wasn't going to wear the clothes you wanted him to wear?" Coach Wooden looked at him, looked at me in the chair next to him, looked at the crowd, came right back to him and says, "Young man, the only thing that matters is that Bill thought I was going to kick him off the team." And I did. And there was nothing more important than being on the team.
All right then, friends, how did that go? There's not much more to say. So I think the more I ramble on here, I'm just going to take away from what you just listened to. So I want to thank our sponsors at Capital One Trade Credit. If you're interested in growing your top line revenue with decreasing your risk, check out Capital One Trade Credit. As for me, and our goal here at Bradley, Hartman & Co. is to make this the best podcast you listen to. So you can email me directly. That's right. Right to my inbox. You're going to go right to the top. If you have ways that we can make this better for you, better topics, better guests, anything at all, our goal is to make this worth your time and attention, and we value each and every one of you listening. Feel free to email me directly at bradley@bradleyhartmanandco.com. And if you are in California and you are not a member of the WCLBMA, you need to look in the mirror, strongly question what is going on in your life. Why are you not part of this organization? Absolutely, you should check it out. And I would argue, even if you're in Washington, you're in Oregon, you're in Nevada, I'm sure there's some other states that border California, Arizona. Sure, should be all of it, I think. Maybe not. Anyway, you absolutely should be part of it as well. Check it out. The WCLBMA, you can just Google that. But if you can't remember all those letters in a row, West Coast LBM Association, WCLBMA, you can check out their website, which is lumberassociation.org. Hat tip to whoever got that URL back in 1987. So that's all we've got. So friends, thanks for listening. We're going to close out like we always do with our leadership mantra. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.